Hey, what's going on, guys? Welcome back to the GSMC Chip Shot Football Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Sports Network. I'm your host, Manny Maradiege. Today is Friday, October 4th, 2024. We are coming off of a great Thursday night football game last night, an awesome game between the Falcons and the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. We're going to go into that game, reviewing it, giving our thoughts on it, and just breaking down what we saw after last night's impressive victory by the Atlanta Falcons. Also, we're going to be getting into our game picks as well for the remainder of the Sunday slate that we didn't get to yesterday, as well as talking about the trade rumors connecting Amari Cooper or potentially DeAndre Hopkins, maybe Devontae Adams to the Kansas City Chiefs. We're going to talk about all of that and unpack that all on today's show, plus some more topics down the line as well. So, before we jump into all of that stuff, I have to remind you guys, if you guys want to be part of the show and have any questions, comments, or opinions you just want to share, there's an easy way to go about that now, and we always want to hear what you guys have to say. Your input is a big part of what makes this show great, and we thrive on your insights and energy that you guys bring to the show as well. So, now, if you want to make it absolutely sure that your message gets featured on the show, I see it and I read it out loud, go ahead and use the new feature available to you guys, the new Super Chat feature that you can access now by just clicking the $ at the bottom of the chat box to send in your Super Chat. In this way, it guarantees that your message gets on the air, and it's also a fantastic way to support our channel, and we rely on your support to keep bringing you guys the sports content you love, and we appreciate every bit of it. So go ahead and let us know what you're thinking. Hit the Super Chat button, and let's keep this show as exciting and as interactive as possible. A big thanks to you guys for helping out the show, getting involved. I always think it's great when you guys get involved, and I like answering some of the questions as well. And you could have a lot, starting off with last night's topic on anything you guys would like to share, because we saw a lot in this game overall. A great matchup. What you'd ideally love to see in these divisional games is things like this. Very close matchup, back and forth, very even throughout the entirety of the game. And you know something, all of us that watched this game, we deserve to watch a game like this, because if you tuned into last night's game, and unfortunately, we all probably watched the game previous to that on Thursday Night Football, the Cowboys and the Giants, we deserve to watch a game like this after having watched the NFC East matchup between the Cowboys and the Giants, unfortunately. And just a quick side note on that, I think these divisional games, when you see them like back-to-back like that, I think it shows a lot of the quality, the type of contending teams that are in each division. I think you can base a lot of that off of the games that are shown between these two. We saw a snooze fest in the NFC East 2 Thursdays ago now, and now this time we saw a great battle, great offensive battle between the Falcons and the Bucs. And I think it says a lot about which division is in better shape right now. That just came into my head while I was prepping for this show. But talking about last night's game, right? A 36-30 victory for the Atlanta Falcons over the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. A fantastic night for Atlanta's offense, and specifically Kirk Cousins as well. And Tampa Bay, in that same breath, not a bad performance overall. If you score 30 points, that's anything but a bad performance. But still, it just felt like they were just too injured to not really make a massive impact with some of the guys like Antoine Winfield, like Kalijah Kancey, and some of these guys on defense especially. They could have definitely used them last night in that aspect. But regardless of that, the Falcons now go to 3-2 in the division, same record as the Bucs, but because of that divisional head-to-head, tiebreaker, the Falcons are the leader in that division for the first time this year, and it's great. It's great because they take the lead, they had a breakout performance like this, and now if we look at it a little bit closer here, we'd have to start obviously talking about Kirk Cousins. A career night, insane night for Kirk Cousins, 42 of 58, 509 yards last night, 4 touchdowns, and he also threw 1 interception as well. The running game wasn't so present, but still, you had some contribution from Bijan and Tyler Algier. Not to the level that we expect them to, but I think the flow of the game seemed like they wanted to slow the pace down at all with the running game. So, that just came with the game. Also, on the receiving side of it, great performances all around. Drake London, 12 receptions for 154 yards and a touchdown. Darnell Mooney. Darnell Mooney, 9 receptions for 105 yards and another touchdown, or 2 touchdowns for him in last night's contest. And finally, Kyle Pitts. I've done enough of these Falcons games without even mentioning him in the stats. 7 receptions for 88 yards is what we need to see out of Kyle. Not 100 yards each game, but still, it's like, come on, like you just look at Kyle Pitts, and for him not to get a catch in any of these games is insane. Shout out Eric Fortis Jr. Welcome to the show. But yeah, continuing on this, looking at the other side, Baker Mayfield, not as daunting numbers as Kirk Cousins, but still 3 touchdowns on the night, 9 for 24 and 180 yards. And Mike Evans, solid night for him as well. 5 receptions, 62 yards, and 2 touchdowns. A lot of touchdowns in this game, just from looking at it, trying to count it up in my head. There's probably like over 7 or so touchdowns in this game, which is insane. And breaking it down a little bit in the game, you look at that first half, and it was very fast-paced, very, the Falcons get on the field, they score, the Bucs answer, and we're off right away from the get-go. There was only 1 punt in the first half and a missed field goal. Without that missed field goal, 8 of the 9 possessions would have led to points overall, either 3 or 7, evidently, with the touchdown. So, also excluding the kneel down at the end, there was 9 total possessions, and basically all of them led to points, which was great. And Tampa Bay led the contest 24-17 at the half, and then in the second half it was more of the same. Thankfully, there was just not this huge drop off. It was still back and forth, more so with field goals and keeping the game a little bit reined in, but still. A lot of great plays being made, and it wasn't until Jesse Bates forced the fumble with 3:39 minutes left to go in the fourth quarter, and with Atlanta down 30-27, that's exactly what they needed to try and get their offense back out there, right? Not just let the Bucs sort of kind of wind down the clock, because the Bucs were already in the red zone, and they were at least going to get 3 points out of that. And Jesse Bates comes up huge for this Falcons team again. There was absolutely no defense played in this game, just to reiterate that fact. No defense at all in this game until that massive play, obviously. And then, which was crazy about that, I'll admit this to you guys, is that I actually didn't see this fumble, and I actually didn't see the next drive where Kirk Cousins actually threw an interception to Levante David. And at that point, the huge swing of momentum, I actually didn't see that happen. I fell asleep at that point, and I woke up, and the Falcons had the ball, and they were driving to try and get a field goal. So the game wasn't as exciting for me live. And then when I saw it over, I'm like, yo, like what? Like this game could have ended twice. But the Bucs had a missed opportunity there. Unfortunately for Bucky Irving, he fumbled, and now you had that next drive, like I said, where Kirk threw that interception. Right after that was where kind of the Bucs, I guess you could say, fell apart, because of the fact that after Tampa turned the ball over, they got it back off of their own turnover. They had that drive there where they could have really put this game out of hands, really, for the Falcons. But if you guys look at that drive, it was just really bad. It was awful. They went backwards 14 yards instead of gaining any positive yardage. I think they had a holding call in there. They had a run that lost like 3 yards or something. They had another bad play, and then they basically lost like 14 to 15 yards and only took off 24 seconds from the clock, which left the Falcons with a lot of time to just go down and kick a field goal, and that's exactly what they did. And at that point, they have all the momentum, right? The turnover, they turn it over. They had a great defensive stop, and Kirk Cousins, it seems like every game the Falcons are in a close game where he has to put his Superman cape on and lead a game-winning, game-tying, drive at the end of the game to get a field goal or a touchdown, and he's been as perfect as you could get for the Falcons. And overall, just my thoughts on this game. Like I said, Tampa certainly would have benefited with obviously having Antoine Winfield out there, an all-pro type of safety. Kalijah Kancey is an underrated player for them. Having him and Vita Vea on that defensive line is huge for them because there was no pressure at all. Kirk Cousins, every throw, I don't think there was ever a time where he had to make a throw on the run or he was constantly getting hit or anything like that. These two teams, I think leading up into this game, I mentioned how the Bucs had like 8 sacks or something on the year. 6 of them came in week 3. So without that performance, they would be dead last in getting pressure on the quarterback. And the Falcons aren't too far off. They only had 4 sacks coming into this game. No pressure whatsoever. Leads to games like this for Kirk. But without, those excuses, I guess you could say, for the Bucs, still, I think this was a great showing for the Falcons offense to really show us their true potential. After last week, they scored 0 touchdowns on the offensive side of the ball. This is the perfect way to respond to that. Kirk looked more like the $180 million quarterback that they signed. You saw Raheem Morris, how excited he was. They finally got Kyle Pitts going. That's the biggest thing. It's going to help this offense out a lot. Drake London looked like one of the most underrated receivers last night after his performance. And, I didn't know, based on how this offense played, that Julio Jones and Roddy White were going to be playing last night to help Kirk Cousins and this offense out. Because looking at Drake London and Darnell Mooney, not to say that they had no business putting up those numbers, but Darnell Mooney really, if I read these numbers again, it was 9 receptions for 105 yards and 2 touchdowns. Maybe it is just because he was playing for the Bears, but had no idea that Darnell Mooney was capable of something like this. But that's great for the Falcons. Great for the Falcons, for him, Drake London, and that entire offense. And, of course, they're not going to keep this pace up. Kirk is not going to throw for 60 times in a game. They need to run it more often than not, but this was a great game to respond to last week's showing against the Saints where the offense kind of disappointed in a way. Now they're 3-2 leading the division, and they have extra days of rest now. So it can't get much better for the Falcons at this point. They head into this extended break 3-2 and get a hard-fought win in the division over the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. But now, on that topic, mentioning Drake London and Darnell Mooney, we're going to continue talking about wide receivers and the Kansas City Chiefs. Obviously, the Chiefs are needing some help there after their recent injuries. Would Amari Cooper or DeAndre Hopkins be the better fit for them? And I'll answer that question and why I believe it could be these two guys after this upcoming break. You're listening to the GSMC Chip Shot Football Podcast.
I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign.
I wanna be the greatest. Everybody on the fake shit. I look around and feel like everybody is the fakest. I make this every day and I'm impatient, hoping one day I blow up from the basement. Statement, the top is so vacant. I don't hear shit that I think is amazing. Waiting for my day when I'm playing sold out shows for 1,000 faces. Hey, give me that crown, get in my way and to be put down. It ain't your place, all this my town. If I want that shit, then I'll get it right now. I'm losing it, the noose it fits. I'm losing shit, a stupid myth. You choose to live or choose to dip. You choose to fight or lose your grip and lose a gift.
I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign. Is everybody in the world blind?
Welcome back to the GSMC Chip Shot Football Podcast now, and discussing some more on the wide receiver part of, a team. Obviously, we got to look at the Kansas City Chiefs because while they have been known for a great offense, obviously this year they're 4-0. They're doing things right, but what hasn't gone right for them and has actually gone from bad to worse happened last Sunday in the game against the Chargers where I think it was early first quarter or second quarter maybe where Patrick threw an interception intended for Rashee Rice, and during that return, Asante Samuel had the ball hit out of his hands by Rashee Rice, who tracked back, made the tackle, and then that could have been a great play just overall if it finished there. But Patrick also was trying to tackle Asante Samuel Jr. and he went low while Rashee Rice came up behind Asante Samuel and punched the ball out from behind. And Samuel kind of moved out of the way, and Patrick, of course, going low, completely takes out his own receiver, Rashee Rice, unfortunately. And it didn't look good. It didn't look good from what we saw live, and he was obviously helped off the field, was carted back into the locker room, and just some more bad luck for the Chiefs in this regard, because the wide receivers, the offensive weapons that they had, looked great before the season, and now they're down to like I don't want to say just their backups, right? Like a negative connotation, but really the guys that maybe they weren't expecting to rely heavily upon just going into week 5 already, right? And it didn't look too bad. I mean, it didn't look good, the injury to Rashee Rice. And, they still haven't given us a definite analysis on what it's going to be. Head coach Andy Reid mentioned that they're going to wait for the swelling to go down to try and do some more tests on him. So, it's still up in the air. Some people think it's an ACL, a PCL injury or something like that, which would end his season. But I'm sure the Chiefs and a lot of fans are staying optimistic about it. So until it's definite, we don't really know how long he's going to be out. But it just adds on to the laundry list of players that are going to be missing, right? Hollywood Brown had shoulder surgery. He's not going to be able to return, it looks like, in the regular season. Then also you had Isaiah Pacheco have a fracture, I believe, in his leg. He's probably going to miss most, if not all, of the regular season as well. And, that's already 2 of the guys that you're heavily relying upon to create offense. I know Hollywood Brown didn't play in the regular season, but Isaiah Pacheco was that running game. So now you're looking at Samaje Perine, you're looking at Sky Moore, Juju Smith-Schuster, who just came back this year. Guys like Justin Watson. Travis Kelce had a better game, so maybe this gets him more involved, but still, I think Xavier Worthy also can't go without mentioning him. It's not awful, right? But still, because it's the Chiefs, and it's not awful, but anybody else, it wouldn't do the job at all. And you don't want to have he's not on the same page as the receivers, or they're just not good enough. And last year you had the benefit of having Isaiah Pacheco, right? He was a great option for them. Probably could have done the same this year, but now he's down hurt. Have to use Samaje Perine, Carson Steele, the rookie, who has looked good, but he's fumbled, I think, once or twice. So I don't know. I mean, they're 4-0. It's not the end of the world, but still, where do we look for help now? Because the Chiefs, we're talking about history here, right, with the Chiefs. We're not just talking about trying to make the playoffs or getting to a Super Bowl. They've done that plenty. We're taking it next level now, talking about repeating as Super Bowl champions for the 3rd consecutive year. This obviously means a lot to them to cement their names in history even more than they already have. So what needs to happen for that to happen now? Because it's looking a little bit dicey now with how the Bills are playing, the Ravens, and the Texans obviously still. You're going to need more than just these guys, right? And that's where we get to the names of Amari Cooper, Davante Adams, we have to mention him, and DeAndre Hopkins for me, in some potential trade scenarios that I have been, sort of seeing on social media or just other websites that continue to link these 3 names to the Chiefs, and they've all been mentioned as real options. I'd like to remind you guys that the trade deadline is on November 5th, so about exactly a month away from now. Maybe the Chiefs can do something, and I think if they were to do it, it would be with one of these 3 guys. Why is it Amari Cooper? Why is it DeAndre Hopkins or even Davante Adams? Well, looking at specifically Amari Cooper and Hopkins, right? Those 2 are the prime candidates, 1A and 1B for me. Davante, I'll just mention it now. Probably not going to go to the Chiefs. I just have to mention him, obviously, because he requested a trade. I'm sure he would have no problem going to the Chiefs, but the Raiders in that same division, no chance. They're asking for a 2nd-round pick. If the Chiefs really want him, I'm only asking them to give me like 2 first-round picks back-to-back years. If I'm the Raiders, I'm not giving Davante Adams to the Chiefs. That's just the reality. He's probably going to go to the Jets. We talked about it yesterday, but it's really Amari Cooper and DeAndre Hopkins. Why these two names? It makes the most sense because you look at the scenarios that both of their current teams are dealing with right now. You have the Cleveland Browns sitting at 1-3, and also the Tennessee Titans sitting at 1-3. And their situations over the next couple weeks could determine if either the Browns or either the Titans try to cash in on Amari Cooper or try to cash in on DeAndre Hopkins, because obviously if they say over the next 4 weeks they lose 2 or 3 of those games and it's looking very bad, the chances of making the playoffs at that point are not very good, and you're coming up right against the trade deadline, right? For a lack of better terms, if you're just going to mail it all in and just give up essentially on this year, why not try to get something out of Hopkins and Amari Cooper, who Cooper I think is 30 years old, DeAndre Hopkins 32 years old. Could be interesting for a team like the Chiefs who needs receivers, and I'm sure other teams that I'm not mentioning, but it depends a lot on their situations, right? And it's so interesting that they're both 1-3, and the contract situations for both of these receivers is what makes this so anticipated for me with Cooper and Hopkins. Looking at Amari Cooper, I'm sure I talked about it at some point in the offseason where Amari Cooper was actually planning on potentially holding out because of his contract situation. He is on the last year of that deal, and he was looking to get either an extension or some more guaranteed money, and he got the latter of that. The Browns didn't extend him. They decided to not extend their 30-year-old wide receiver because of the wide receiver market, obviously. Maybe they didn't feel like it was appropriate to do that for Amari at this stage in his career. So instead, all they did was they basically guaranteed the remainder of his salary. I think it was like $20 million per year. And they also added $5 million in incentives. So he's still on the last year of his deal, but he has that money guaranteed now for this last year at least. And it looks like they could be moving on from him next year potentially if they don't extend him. So instead of waiting that long, and if the situation gets really bad, if you're the Browns and you're like if you're like 1-5 or something like that, or like 2-6 or something, then it could be pretty interesting to hear what the Chiefs are willing to give up to try and make those improvements to your team. And the fact that Amari Cooper is going to be a free agent anyway next year, instead of just losing him out for free, why not try and get something back? That's why the context around the Browns matters so much. And they have, if I'm not mistaken, the hardest schedule in the NFL. I don't have their schedule in front of me, but their next couple games are very difficult, and really the entirety of their schedule. So this could become a likely scenario where their record and how Deshaun Watson's playing also is in a bad place potentially. So that's why this is such a very likely option to me, in my opinion. And then similarly with DeAndre Hopkins, right? 1-3 Tennessee Titans. Will Levis hasn't looked that great. They just got their first win. The Texans are looking good. The Colts are looking pretty good as well. And they're 1-3 right now, and they're not necessarily impressing everybody with their performances. So how that goes, they could just be in just as bad a situation as the Browns. And with a 32-year-old DeAndre Hopkins, he signed a 2-year deal in 2023, so he's also on that last year of his deal, and he would be a free agent after this year as well in 2025. So again, if you're the Titans trying to build up this young, exciting team with Tyler Boyd, Calvin Ridley, trying to add more to that offensive line, obviously, because it needs help, or just bringing in more pieces anywhere else, why not try and cash in on DeAndre Hopkins instead of losing him out for free next year? And they both obviously, I think, would fit what the Chiefs are looking for as well, because as much as Cooper and DeAndre Hopkins might not fit into the long-term plans of the Browns or the Titans, they don't necessarily fit that for the Chiefs either. But that's why I think would be such a perfect situation, again, for either Cooper or Hopkins to match up with the Chiefs, because they're only looking for a short-term option. The Chiefs have already the guy they're trying to build this team around and kind of move forward with them. That guy was Rashee Rice, and unfortunately he got hurt, and it's not looking great. And they had Hollywood Brown next to him. They drafted Xavier Worthy. they have this young nucleus of wide receivers already. They don't need to sign a 32-year-old wide receiver to a 3-year, like, 25, $27 million per year kind of deal. They don't really need that. They already have that talent. So this is why just trading for DeAndre, trading for Amari Cooper at this stage, and just riding out the remainder of that contract is too good to pass up on, in my opinion, for the Kansas City Chiefs. Now, I'm sure they're going to wait for the official news on Rashee Rice to kind of see where he is at and how much time he is going to miss, and I'm sure that will affect how aggressive they will be going forward in this deal. But, it's looking tough for the Browns, and I actually do have their schedule here. The Browns are 1-3, and their next couple games are against Washington, against the Eagles, against the Bengals, against the Ravens, and the Los Angeles Chargers before November 5th. It's hard to say they're guaranteed to win any of those games. Then also for the Titans, they play the Colts, the Bills, the Lions, and the New England Patriots before November 5th. They might win one, maybe two of those games, but it's not going to have a great record anyway. So, it's there. The pathway to it, in my eyes, is pretty clear right then and there. And if the Chiefs happen to lose one of these games as well, and it is obvious that they need a wide receiver because the guys that they have are playing not good or playing pretty bad, I think it'll only accelerate this process more. I think it makes too much sense. And I'm just anticipating already that Rashee Rice is going to be out for a good amount of time. So, it's there. It's there. All I did was just outline it, and don't be surprised when and more likely if the Chiefs end up trading for one of these guys. It's there. I think it's too obvious to pass up on. But who will that guy be? That's up for the Chiefs to decide. They're pretty much the same level to me. So we'll see what the Chiefs end up doing closer to November 5th. But we just mentioned both of these teams' schedules, and on that topic, we're going to go into some more of the scheduling in the NFL. Coming up after this break, we're going to talk about the other game picks that I didn't get to yesterday. The remaining 6 games that we're going to predict, go into, discuss, and analyze which team is going to come out with the victory. That is coming up after this break. We'll be right back right after this.
Looking for your daily fix of sports talk without having to pay for it? GSMC Sports Network is available on YouTube. Just search GSMC Sports Network. Get your fix of daily sports talk shows on YouTube, absolutely free. NFL, college football, NBA, MLB, MMA, UFC, fantasy football, and so much more. GSMC Sports Network has shows running all day long, with new sports shows starting every 2 hours. Just like on your favorite cable sports channel, except GSMC Sports Network is absolutely free. Just search GSMC Sports Network on YouTube to catch one of your new favorite shows, like the GSMC College Football Podcast, Chip Shot Football Podcast, Hoops and Heels Women's Sports Podcast, GSMC Basketball Podcast, and so many more. Check it out for yourself. GSMC Sports Network, now available on YouTube absolutely free. Search GSMC Sports Network on YouTube right now.
We are back now on the GSMC Chip Shot Football Podcast to discuss some more of the game picks that I have here available. After we only got through the first half of yesterday's show, we're going to go into the remainder of these games now to talk about it. There's a lot of interesting games still left to talk about with some pretty big implications. And without further ado then, we're going to get right into that. Get Kirk Cousins off the screen and bring up the slate of games now that we have available for the remainder of Sunday. Starting off with the top left, as we do typically, the Browns at the Washington Commanders. We just finished talking about the Browns, and in this game, they're going up against the talk of the league for the last 2 weeks, right? Jaden Daniels and how good this Commanders team has been. Starting off with their performance against the Bengals, and then carrying on to their dominant road performance against the Arizona Cardinals. And they're one of the top scoring offenses in the NFL right now, and while Cleveland has been on the opposite end of it, right? They've only scored at most 18 points, and that was in their only win against the Jacksonville Jaguars. And to me, that really says more about the Jaguars than it does about the Browns. We know that their defense is good. They're holding teams to below 18 points for them to win. But that was the only game it happened. And then in all the other games, they've lost by like 4 points. They've lost by 6. They got blown out by the Cowboys. That was really the one exception. But it's going to be a narrative or some news to follow up on regarding Brian Robinson. He is dealing with an injury. So if he isn't able to go, because this running game has been so good for the Washington Commanders, that'll kind of give me a little bit of doubt about the Commanders and whether or not it's going to be as dominant, but I still believe that they have enough to get this done. Jaden Daniels, I'm not going to say he's like the best quarterback in the NFC or anything like that, like it has been thrown around, but he's playing very good. Clearly the best rookie quarterback in the NFL so far through the first 4 weeks, and I love what the Commanders are doing. They're back at home. The Browns still have to figure out who they are, what they can really get out of Deshaun Watson. So for that reason, I'm going to go with Washington to go to an astounding 4-1 on the year. And then moving down the line, arguably the most anticipated game of all the games this week, we got the Buffalo Bills traveling across the country as far as you could possibly go, probably. I would love to know the time on that flight from Buffalo, basically Canada, to Houston, Texas. If I'm on that trip, that's already like a big bummer for me. But regardless of what I think, of what I feel, this game, obviously the story, Stefon Diggs against his former team. The revenge game for Stefon Diggs and also for Josh Allen. Not a revenge game, but something to prove as well. Can Josh Allen go out there and kind of prove to the world that he doesn't need Stefon Diggs there and then, pretty publicly to everybody, and go out, beat Stefon Diggs' new team, who everybody has as one of the highly talented offenses just overall. If Josh Allen goes in there and dominates, he sends a message to everybody that I don't really need Stefon Diggs. And for Stefon Diggs as well, I'm sure everybody saw what Josh Allen had to say, not directly to Stefon Diggs, but it was as direct as it can be without directly saying his name. Josh Allen said something like I love these receivers, or I love this team now. It's so much easier to play or throw touchdowns to these guys when nobody cares about their personal stats. Like come on. we know what that message was, and I'm sure Stefon Diggs sees it, and he's playing it cool, as to be expected, but this game probably means so much to both of those guys as well. And both of these teams are good. They're both 3-1. There are some variables, though. The Texans are probably going to be without Joe Mixon or Dameon Pierce. They haven't practiced yesterday, and I haven't gotten the latest injury update on them, but it doesn't look like they're going to be playing. So that's a big piece to be missing for the Texans. And also for the Bills, we just saw how Von Miller was suspended by the NFL for the next 4 games for violating the conduct policy in the NFL. So that's a big miss for them defensively. Another defensive hit for this Buffalo Bills team, and that's one of the biggest ones that you can take away. So they're both going to be missing something. And because of that, on my pick, I feel like this game could be similar to the Ravens game, not in the way that they're just going to dominate them in the running game, but I think more so it could be through the air, where this Buffalo Bills team, while they're good, they're so good when they're playing with a lead, or when those pass rushers can get after the quarterback and they can have better coverage on the back end. But with no Von Miller, I don't know how much that pressure is going to get to CJ Stroud when he has Tank Dell, Nico Collins, who's playing phenomenal. Arguably, I mentioned Drake London as the most underrated receiver, but it just goes to show how I forgot about Nico Collins. He's playing fantastic, and Stefon Diggs, obviously, as well. I feel like they could overwhelm the Buffalo Bills defense again, this time through the air, and I just don't like the fact that there's no Von Miller, and the Bills are traveling so far, again, on the road. I feel like the Texans have more in their favor, and I feel like they could overwhelm them on offense and win maybe another shootout where the Bills' lack of weapons could show off yet again. So I'm going to go with the Texans in this one. Stefon Diggs presumably gets the last laugh over Josh Allen. And then one more game down, the Panthers and the Bears, such a weird game if you know the history with these two franchises, right? They're both going to be linked, it seems like forever, because of that trade that they made in not this year's draft, but the ones going before that, because of the big change or the big trade that the Panthers and Bears made that sent DJ Moore over to the Chicago Bears. Obviously, also the Bears got the 9th overall pick in 2023 and also the number 1 pick in 2024. Eventually, Chicago, eventually that became that pick, the number 1 pick that was Chicago's, eventually became the number 1 pick because of how bad the Panthers were with Bryce Young. And not only to make matters worse, they selected Bryce Young and the team was bad around them, but the guy that was picked second, CJ Stroud, goes off to become already one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL. So in an alternate universe, maybe Caleb Williams is playing for the Panthers, right? That's how nuts this all could have been really different if you really think about it. And DJ Moore playing against his old team as well is another storyline. So, talking about the factors in this game, I really like Chicago because of what they showed me last week. They had a great game against a better Los Angeles Rams team, and Carolina now is starting Andy Dalton, and he's played better than Bryce Young, but I just feel like they had such a good showing, the Bears did, against the Rams. They had the formula that I was waiting to see them use through the running game with their defense, which is fantastic. I feel like their defense could overwhelm this Panthers team, and if they can manage to get out to a lead at home, then you could start sending Montez Sweat after these guys and bringing just some more pressure where it forces Andy Dalton into some more questionable situations. So because of that, I'm going to go with the Bears in this one. Caleb Williams also, I think, is starting to figure it out a little bit more, starting to become less antsy and anxious in there. Give me the Bears to win in this one and go to 3-2 on the year. Then, shifting over to the other side, the Raiders and the Broncos. For each of these games, I have a headline that kind of give the main idea for each of these games. All I wrote for this one was just division game, because this game could be the most vanilla, just sort of unpredictable game that I've probably tried to predict in the first 5 weeks, because these teams are so honestly, they're so exactly the same, talking about what situations they're both in, and they both have the exact same record. So it's so weird to find the differences in this game, because we look at the quarterback situation, Bo Nix, and on the other side, Aiden O'Connell and Gardner Minshew, right? It's 50-50. Then you look at the weapons, Courtland Sutton, no Devontae Adams now. You look at Jacoby Myers, Brock Bowers already as well. Pretty similar as well. The running game is all right for both of them too. They're 2-2. Their defenses played very well last week. The Broncos shutting down the Jets, and the Raiders closing the door on the Browns as well. So it's hard to pick out differences. The way that I'll predict it is just the fact that Las Vegas has won their last 8 games against the Broncos overall. So that's why I'm going with the Raiders to take this game on the road. Bo Nix, I'm pretty sure, hasn't thrown a passing touchdown yet, and I just like the Raiders' weapons more so than I like the Broncos. I like Jacoby Myers a lot. Trey Tucker, I believe is his name, played very well for the Raiders last week. They seem to kind of know a little bit what they're doing with Alexander Mattison and Zamir White, so that was encouraging. And Brock Bowers, I think now they could build the offense around him, which should make things easier for them as well. So give me the Raiders in that game. And now moving down to the second to last game here, we have the Arizona Cardinals and the 49ers. Another game that has big implications, obviously, because it's a divisional game, but what's fascinating about this game is that there could be a situation where 3 teams in this division have the exact same record, and that would happen if the Arizona Cardinals won this game. They would go to 2-3, the 49ers would go to 2-3, and we'd have to wait for the Rams to beat the Packers to also go to 2-3. That's how close this division has been through the first 5 weeks. While the Arizona Cardinals, you might think, don't look great or aren't performing great. They're only one game back of the 49ers, and same thing with the, not the Seahawks, but the 49ers, the Cardinals, and the Rams. Right, you'd think they'd be better, but they're 1-3, same record as the Cardinals. So, anything can happen really in this division. It's been very close, and other than the Seahawks, no one's really, kind of distanced themselves yet. The 49ers have a chance to do that if they go to 3-2. The Cardinals go to 1-4, and then now you can create some difference. And I think that's probably what's going to happen. As much as I'm optimistic about Marvin Harrison Jr., Kyler Murray playing great, James Conner, I really like that trio, but their run defense just hasn't been there at all, whatsoever. It's been pretty bad. They allowed 187 rushing yards to Detroit in week 3, I believe, and they just allowed 216 total rushing yards to the Commanders last week, and the 49ers are going to do the same thing. So that's why I would love the Cardinals to win. I just feel like it's too much for them in San Francisco as well. And if they do win, I think it would be more on the 49ers than the Cardinals, honestly. So I'm going to go with the 49ers. They'll separate themselves a little bit more in this game. And then lastly, the Giants and the Seahawks. It could have been closer, but we got news this morning that Malik Neighbors wasn't going to play because of a concussion, so I have no idea what the Giants are going to do in terms of trying to generate some sort of offense. They have to travel across the entire country to go play in Seattle. It's going to be miserable probably. No Malik Neighbors. He's been, I forget how much percentage of this off questionable. He's dealing with a groin injury, and the Seahawks team is for real. I know they're coming off of a loss, but Geno's playing well. This offense is very good as well. They're putting up a lot of points. They're getting a lot of production from their receivers, and that's a lot of credit going to Ryan Grubb, their new offensive coordinator. So they're doing a fantastic job, whereas the Giants, they maybe could have had a shot because their defensive line is pretty good, but with no offense from Malik Neighbors, I don't even know what we're going to see out of Daniel Jones. So, and how conservative they are with him, I think the Seahawks could run away with this game early in this one and just not look back. So, I'm going to go with the Seahawks to win this game as well. They'll go to 4-1 in that division and stay in the lead as well. So, those are my picks. That should do it for all the Sunday games on this Week 5 slate that we have in the NFL. So, react to it. Let me know what you guys think of my picks, and maybe share any of your picks if you'd like as well. So with that being said, we still have 2 more topics to get to on today's show. Some feedback given by some of these NFL players on the new Guardian caps that some players wear pretty regularly during these NFL games. I thought it was fascinating to see what players were thinking about them so far. We're going to get into their reactions and just my thoughts from it as well. And lastly, we're just talking about some last-minute injury news in the last segment of today's show. So stay tuned for that. We'll be right back in just a few seconds.
For the best and latest podcasts available anywhere, go to the podcast app on your cell phone and type in GSMC to access free content-rich podcasts on health and wellness, book reviews, sports, entertainment, relationships, social media, movies, technology, finance, and even weird news. Subscribe and download the GSMC Podcast Network's family of shows, available everywhere podcasts are found.
Jumping right back into the action here on the GSMC Chip Shot Football Podcast, we have some reactions to do, some reacting to do to these Guardian caps that I'm sure maybe not a lot of people have known that are present in some of these NFL games, because it is honestly hard to tell in some games. Like I know the Steelers right guard James Daniels wears it, and you can barely tell on him, but other times it is a little bit more obvious. And the Guardian caps have become more of an integral part of just life in the NFL for some of these players, because over the last few years, we've seen what we now know as Guardian caps be integrated more and more. I believe it was in 2022 where they became a mandate to wear for certain positions at practice, certainly, and that only grew since that time, and now almost everyone wears them at practice as well. And this year was the first time ever that the NFL decided to open up the option to have the players wear them in game if they decided to do so for that extra level of safety, right? Head injuries are a serious thing. The NFL wants to cut back on them, so why not let the players wear them in game? It also was connected to changing the kickoff format and whatnot, and all these questionable calls that referees make, because the safety in the NFL, the head safety especially, is huge. So they're letting them wear the guardian caps now as well. And if you're unfamiliar with them, they're just basically like if you have your normal helmet, it's just like a little cover over them that has extra padding on it, so it absorbs more of the hit on impact, obviously, to not have such an impact on your direct head and brain and things like that. So it is hard to point out, right? Because in some players you can barely tell, but then I think it's funny when like a smaller receiver has it and they have a huge head. It looks like it's pretty funny, but it was a thing in the preseason as well. We talked about it on here, how Geno Smith mentioned that he might potentially wear one, but he doesn't. And there are other players as well that wore it in the preseason. I think Jonathan Taylor did, but I'm almost certain he doesn't in the games as well. And now that we're through basically the first quarter of the NFL season, the Athletic surveyed 109 players to get their feedback on some of the initial reactions from some players that wear the guardian caps or others that are still kind of in between on whether or not to do it. And so far, initially, we've seen that the majority of these players are still opposed to the idea of wearing the guardian caps. Out of 109, 65 of them said that they were opposed to wearing the guardian caps during the games. We had 31 respond in favor of the guardian caps as well. And also we had 13 players that were still pretty much undecided as well for the remainder of the poll of the 109 players. So very favorably favoring the side of it against the guardian caps. I think as expected, because from my thought point, the guardian caps, it's a good idea in principle, but I don't know. I just think it looks so silly. I think it just looks so silly. It really doesn't look great. And also, it doesn't completely take it away. And, getting into some of the player feedbacks, which became pretty popular, and some of the objections that some of the players had, a lot of them said that it just adds extra weight to their helmets, and it could be discombobulating, right? If your head just weighs a little bit more, already more than it does with the helmet on your head, obviously, but that's what you've been used to all your life. And now if you're adding, I don't know how much they weigh, but if you're adding a little bit more, it could be a little off-putting, right? Trying to orientate your head. I don't know. I've never worn a guardian cap or a helmet really that long in my life, so you can only imagine what it's like out there against, right, professionals at the highest level. The little things, the small details like this, I'm sure make such a difference for a lot of the players, rightly so in some cases, but that's one of the main concerns with them. Also, another player mentioned as unnecessary weight that they just don't need to wear, that they're opposed to wearing. And something else that was brought up was the idea that the guardian caps come off or unclip very easily as well, and it could become annoying to try and like find it if it's on the ground or something like that and try to put it back on, or having to constantly readjust it as well. It's not something you want to think about when you're out there playing football, right? You have a million things going on, things that you could never imagine, right, outside of just the plays and trying to decide what the opposing side of the ball is trying to do, right? I'm sure there's a million, like trillion other things football players have to worry about without having to clip their guardian cap back on. So that's something else that didn't sit too well with some players that are opposed to it, but it wasn't all negative. There was some positive in what some players said. Linebacker for the Cleveland Browns, Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah, mentioned that he started wearing the guardian caps after week 1, where he took a big hit, and it clearly affected him a little bit, to the point where he considered wearing the guardian caps, and now he is one of the players that does wear it. So getting some people to switch over. I thought that was pretty positive in favor of the Guardian caps. Also, Patriots safety Jabril Peppers also mentioned how he likes how he doesn't really feel anything when he's hitting while having the Guardian cap on. So that's awesome for Jabril Peppers to not feel anything when he's hitting with the Guardian cap on. But he did say as a disclaimer that he will not wear it in hot weather. So it's nice that he plays in New England, I guess, to always wear that and have that extra layer of protection. And then there was those who want more protection from the guard, or they just want more protection. Some players want more protection, but not necessarily from the Guardian caps as well. I think that that's really like, it is just like a decider, right? Looking funny out there, having that extra weight, like I said, on there, and just being, it's just something that a lot of players just obviously have never done in their life. Wearing this Guardian cap on their head, it could be very just off-putting. As silly as it may sound, and some people might think that it might not weigh anything, they're just being ridiculous. That, some players that are very traditional and very organized in what they do with the routines and things like that, especially football players, to wear this on Sundays now as a complete change for, their headspace is, obviously you can kind of understand it as well, but it doesn't really have to do with the Guardian cap, this other positive, but the fact that the NFL is so proactive in trying to improve the player safety, the head safety as well for these players in the NFL. I thought another positive thing that came out of the Guardian caps and this sort of movement was the fact that the NFL also revealed 12 additional helmet design models that the NFL executive Jeff Miller said that in some of these cases, I think 6 out of the 12 new helmets that they created, he said, provided as much, if not more, protection than a different kind of helmet model, but with a Guardian cap, right? Some of these new helmet designs are just as safe as wearing a Guardian cap with another helmet design as it is just wearing this singular helmet, this new design. So I thought that the Guardian caps and almost like the players' willingness to not wear them kind of had the NFL up their efforts in trying to create a new helmet, and now we have something that's just as safe as wearing a Guardian cap with a different type of helmet. If you decide to wear 6 of these new helmets that have already been rated so highly that the NFL said that the players that have these 6 new helmets that are just as safe as wearing Guardian caps with other helmets, that if they wear one of these 6 new helmets, that players only have to wear this one helmet instead of having to wear the Guardian cap on top of it during practice. So that alone is going to be enough to get a lot of players on board with these new helmet designs. And that's something else that I think players are pretty meticulous about, is the certain type of feel and design on their helmet is huge. It seems silly, and watching on TV, it looks like all helmets are the same, but the fit and the shape and just the comfortability that players have with it is, they could definitely tell when it's not their helmet. I'm 100% sure of that. So now having this idea that 6 new helmets, it is a different design, so maybe they were a bit hesitant, but not wearing the Guardian cap, I think has put a lot of people over the edge now in wanting to try out these new designs, and I think that's great also for the NFL. The desire to wear the Guardian, or to not wear the Guardian cap, was so much that it led to, I'm sure, a lot of players trying out these new designs. So it's great. It increases the player safety, and those are just my overall thoughts on it. I certainly didn't like the look of it, obviously, I'll say that again, but I like the idea that players are aware of it, that some of them are willing to maybe look a little silly or just go out there and try something else new that they've never done before, but it's for their safety, so they're willing to try it. I think that's a great sign for this idea of more player safety, getting the players to buy into it a lot more is a great sign to see, because if there was nobody wearing it and still there was a lot of concussions happening in the NFL, I'm sure there still are, but this is definitely a step in the right direction. We're seeing more helmet designs now be safer, so that's always great. And I think maybe if tight ends or offensive linemen wear them, I don't think that's such a big deal during the games. They're getting hit constantly, maybe not as big of a force, but it happens more often, basically on every single play. So, those are just my quick thoughts on it for players that don't want to wear the Guardian cap now. It's great for them also to have these new helmet designs also, and maybe perhaps one day they continue to better these designs for helmets to kind of ease up on some of the unnecessary roughness calls, right? Because they've been pretty over the top with them so far. I'll say it again, the Minkah Fitzpatrick call, nuts. And I think it has to do with player safety, obviously, and trying to cut that down. Maybe it gets to a point where it's safe enough that they could ease up a little bit on these unnecessary roughness calls, right? Suspending Derwin James as well. It's not in a great place right now, and I think this could help trying to lower the intensity on the unnecessary roughness calls and things like that. But that's sort of another topic for another day. So we're going to leave it at that. And we have one more thing to talk about, just a recap here of some of the latest injury news heading into the weekend now, into Week 5, and what are some developments in some of these injuries and whether or not we think some of these players like Rashee Rice, Malik Nabers, Jonathan Taylor are going to be fit to play in Week 5. We're going to break all of that down right after this next break. Don't go anywhere. Thank you for joining me here on the last segment of today's show. Just going through a last-minute injury news roundup on some of the biggest injuries here to some of the big-name players, right? You see it there on your screen. Rashee Rice, Malik Nabers, and Jonathan Taylor. Some of the biggest injuries that we have to deal with now, these teams have to deal with now in Week 5 of the NFL. So starting off with one of the biggest ones, we mentioned Rashee Rice before, and the troubles that the Chiefs are going to have without him, right? Because he was really starting to kind of step into that role as being the guy for the Chiefs, right? And it was great to see, right? When Travis Kelce wasn't performing to start the year and you just didn't know who was going to step up. Xavier Worthy had a great first game, and it almost overshadowed what Rashee Rice did as well, but he has constantly been a consistent weapon for Patrick Mahomes. He was his go-to guy, and unfortunately he got hurt. And like I said before, we don't really know exactly what the injury diagnosis is, but we do know that yesterday the Chiefs head coach Andy Reid announced that Rashee Rice will be going on the injured reserve at least for now. So it does mean that he's going to be out the next 4 games at least. And it's been since last Sunday where we heard that Rashee Rice was going to get further tests. There was going to be an update at some point after their last game against the Chargers to kind of give a better assessment of this injury and the timetable for him as well. But that obviously hasn't happened. Head coach Andy Reid said that they're waiting for the swelling to go down before they do any more tests on him. But at worst case scenario, it looks like an ACL injury. So, that would obviously end his season. And now it could be something a little bit less severe. I don't want to get anyone's hopes up or anything, but reports yesterday from the Chiefs say that Rashee Rice had a full sleeve on that right leg of his, but was moving without crutches or anything like that. He just had that brace or sleeve, I guess, on his right leg. So, take it as you will, take it with a grain of salt, but at least he's not like on, walking around with crutches and their answer at some point next week. But that's Rashee Rice and that update as well. Elsewhere, we look at the Giants wide receiver Malik Nabers. He was first placed on the injury watch coming off of the game on last Thursday, against the Dallas Cowboys. On that game where they lost, he had a big night, but it was towards the end of the game where all the big stars got hurt. Micah got hurt, DeMarcus Lawrence got hurt, and Malik Nabers suffered a concussion in that game as well. And because of that, he's obviously a big part of their offense, right? That goes without saying. And he was still going through the protocol, and it came to, I think, yesterday where I think it was Ian Rappaport that reported that Malik Nabers faced an uphill battle to play this week because he just hadn't gotten out of the protocol yet. We were into this week already, and then this morning, the head coach of the Giants, Brian Daboll, officially ruled out Malik Nabers with that concussion. He missed most of the days in practice and probably hasn't cleared the attempted or the protocol yet for the concussion. So he has already been ruled out, and the Giants are going to face the Seahawks, a very good Seahawks team, without their best player on offense, I'll say. I was going to say their best player in general, but they got other guys. But still on offense, it's going to be interesting to see how the Giants kind of work around that now, certainly. So that's one thing as well. Elsewhere, you look at the Indianapolis Colts, and I mentioned in this report that I wrote up that we were going to have a better understanding of Anthony Richardson and where he was at. He was dealing with an oblique injury after last week's game against Pittsburgh, where he got hit. Initially, the first hit affected his oblique, and he was out for a couple of plays, and he actually came back, and then he took another big hit to the head, and he was out for the remainder of the game. And now, thankfully, it's only really been that oblique injury, and he has been officially listed as questionable leading up into their next game against the Tennessee Titans. But unfortunately for their other injured player, their other star, Jonathan Taylor, he suffered a high ankle sprain last week again against the Steelers towards the end of that game, and he has not practiced at all this week, and he has already officially been ruled out for this upcoming game against the Titans. He was dealing with that high ankle sprain. There was reports by Ian Rappaport that mentioned that Jonathan Taylor is likely to miss some time, not even just this week. He said some time with this injury, and high ankle sprains are tough. They're tough because there's different grades to these ankle sprains, and I never really understand what they mean, if I'm being honest. But you have different severity levels for them, and we saw Micah Parsons injured with a high ankle sprain, and you just never know. I feel like with ankles or like hamstring injuries, things like that, what it's really going to be like, how long they're going to be out, or how close to 100% they're going to be, and what kind of state they're going to be in going forward. So that's going to be a tough loss for them, running the ball with this great offensive line. The Titans haven't been so hot, they're 1-3, so maybe you feel a little bit comfortable with him missing this game, but I think it's just going forward that it does become a little bit dicey because you don't want him to be out for too long. That's going to be a guy you obviously need to have out there for this Colts team. Elsewhere, we look at some of the official injury designations we have with some of these teams. We look at the New York Jets officially ruling out Morgan Moses. CJ Mosley is doubtful with still that toe injury that has kept him out for the last 2 weeks now. It looks like he's going to miss a third straight game. TJ Hockenson was on the injury report for the Vikings, but he's actually, I think, coming back, I think this week or next week, officially to practice after recovering from that ACL injury and being activated off of the PUP list. So that's positive, but he's not going to play again, obviously. Then we look at the Houston Texans now, and they're dealing with an interesting situation because on their official injury report, they have already ruled out Joe Mixon, and they haven't ruled out, or they have Dameon Pierce listed as questionable right now, which again, it leaves the door open, but they're not going to have Joe Mixon now for a third straight game as well. And it's going to be a huge miss, like I mentioned before, with facing the Buffalo Bills. And I think through the first 2 weeks that I saw Joe Mixon play, as good as Tank Dell and as good as Nico and Stephon Diggs are, when Joe Mixon is playing, this Texans team, you really get to see how good they can be. Because if he's running the ball as efficiently as he was to start the year, you can't do anything, almost, it feels like, honestly, in the simplest terms, because you can't just stop him with a light box, and then you try to load up the box even more, and any of those monsters can beat you on the outside. So that's where I really see the difference in what this Houston Texans team could really be. So unfortunately, he's going to be out. On their injury report as well, they have their defensive end, Derek Barnett, out as well. Jerry Hughes is not going to be playing. And Robert Woods is listed as questionable as well. In some of these other news, some pretty notable ones are for the Baltimore Ravens. Pretty healthy injury report, so actually nothing to report there. The Bengals, on the other hand, playing the Baltimore Ravens, it doesn't look like they're going to have their defensive tackle Sheldon Rankins back yet, which is huge. He's listed as doubtful with a hamstring injury still. So having him in the middle of your defensive line, it's going to be trouble, to say the least, against Derrick Henry. So that's a pretty big miss. Mike Hilton is listed as questionable, and that's pretty much it for the significant injuries there. The Dolphins are going through it, man. Jordan Poyer, their safety, is doubtful with a shin injury, and they already ruled out Jalen Phillips for the remainder of 2024 with a knee injury. So those are the pretty massive ones there. I'm not even going to go into the Patriots because almost all of their team is questionable. It's nuts what I'm looking at now. So I'm going to move on to the Browns. Nick Chubb obviously not playing. He came back to practice, which is a great sign, but he's not ready to play whatsoever. David Njoku is a little bit positive. He's listed as questionable after he was limited on Wednesday but didn't practice at all yesterday. So he's listed as questionable on their injury report, and their two offensive tackles are also listed as questionable. They desperately need Jack Conklin and Jedrick Wills to come back with their each of their respective injuries. Joseph Fig, how you doing? Welcome to the show. And lastly here for the Commanders, no injury designation on Brian Robinson, which is huge news for the Commanders, because Brian Robinson has been very good for them over the last couple weeks now, running the ball very efficiently, and he actually didn't practice again yesterday. He didn't practice on Wednesday and didn't practice on Thursday, so he has no injury designation from what I'm reading, so that's great news. It probably means he is going to play, and I love that because he's on my fantasy team as well. So Brian Robinson looks like he's going to play. And also lastly here, I will mention the 49ers. George Kittle and Fred Warner didn't practice again yesterday. They're pretty much both questionable heading into their game against the Cardinals. And obviously, two guys you want to see play. Head coach Kyle Shanahan mentioned how they're two players that don't necessarily need to practice to play, so there's that aspect of it, but it is still big misses, right? Fred Warner, your quarterback of your defense, and George Kittle, a big piece of your offense. So those guys are the last kind of injury news we're going to get to on today's show, and that'll wrap it up for today's episode. Thank you guys for joining. Please remember to like, follow, and subscribe to the GSMC Chip Shot Football Podcast, and follow and go check out more of the content around this show on both YouTube channels, the Podcast Network channel and the GSMC Sports Network channel, to find more NFL coverage, but in a variety of different ways on there for you guys to go check out. And lastly, make sure to tune in every weekday at 6:30 p.m. Eastern Time for more reactions, breaking news, coverage around the NFL as well, with me, Manny Maradiaga, as your host. Thanking you for joining me here. Hope you guys have a great weekend. Go watch the football games, and we'll come back on Monday to discuss all of them when we get there.
Let's go.
I wake up to a little bit of drool on my pillow, feel like it's gonna be a bad day. Yeah, I'm tired of shit, and the coffee ain't hit yet, damn ain't that